The stopwatch hit 2:43. Admiral Max Horton's U-boat was sinking for the fifth time in a row, and he still couldn't figure out how it happened. The most decorated submarine commander in the Royal Navy stood in a Liverpool basement, staring at the chalk lines on the floor with genuine confusion. His opponent? Janet O'Kell, 19 years old, former plotter, no combat experience whatsoever. Each time Horton tried to evade, her escorts found him before he even realized they were closing in. The first warning he got was the simulated depth charge that killed him. 5 games, 5 deaths. Same result. When he demanded to inspect what O'Kell could actually see through her peephole screen, everything checked out. She wasn't cheating. She was just better. This wasn't supposed to happen. Horton had spent decades hunting ships in real U-boats. He'd written the damn manual on submarine warfare. And this teenager, armed with nothing but white chalk and a tactic called beta search, had just exposed a fatal flaw that was killing thousands of Allied sailors every month. The Royal Navy's 200-year doctrine was wrong, and these young women were about to prove it. 2 days before Janet sank Horton's submarine for the first time, she received a telegram that changed everything. It arrived at Derby House on a Tuesday morning. March 1st, 1943. The messenger didn't hand it to her parents. Protocol dictated it go directly to her duty station. 3 words that every military family dreaded: lost with all hands. HMS Hesperus, her brother's ship. Thomas O'Kell was 23 years old, an anti-submarine warfare specialist, a destroyer officer who did everything by the book. And that was exactly the problem. Janet stood in the basement they called the pit, a damp concrete room that smelled of stale tobacco and fear. And she knew something the Admiralty refused to accept. The book killed him. The Royal Navy's sacred doctrine, the one they'd been following for 2 centuries, was a death sentence. She'd proven it 8 months ago, standing at the plotting table, gripping a piece of white chalk so hard her knuckles went white. Janet did the math one more time. The math that nobody wanted to hear. February 1943 had been a massacre. 63 merchant ships sunk in 28 days. That's 342,000 tons of food, fuel, and ammunition sent to the bottom of the Atlantic. The actuaries in London had crunched the numbers, and the result was terrifying. At this rate, Britain runs out of fuel by July. By September, the island starves into surrender. But the numbers that haunted Janet weren't the cargo tonnage. They were the bodies. 72,000 tons of supplies lost with convoy SC-121. And inside those ships, inside those freezing steel coffins that broke apart in the dark water, were 1,117 sailors. Men like Thomas. Men who followed orders. Men who did exactly what they were trained to do. Men who chased submarines. You see, for 200 years, the Royal Navy operated on a principle that had worked against Napoleon, against the Kaiser, against every surface enemy they'd ever faced: aggressive pursuit. If you spot the enemy, you chase him. You engage decisively. You bring overwhelming force to bear. It feels right. It appeals to every warrior instinct, every notion of courage and honor. But Janet had spent 8 months in this freezing basement, playing a deadly game with chalk and stopwatches, and she'd discovered something that would have gotten her court-martialed if she'd said it out loud. Against a U-boat wolf pack, aggressive pursuit wasn't a strategy. It was a suicide pact. Thomas had written to her 3 weeks before he died. The letter was still in her coat pocket, folded and refolded so many times the creases had started to tear. He'd said the tactics weren't working. He'd said they kept losing ships no matter how hard they fought. He was right. On February 24th, convoy SC-121 was hit. When a U-boat surfaced near the formation, the escorts did exactly what 2 centuries of Royal Navy tradition demanded. They broke formation. They cranked their engines to full speed. They fired star shells that turned the night into day. They dropped depth charges. They hunted with fury. And while they were off chasing a decoy, a single submarine that wanted to be chased, the rest of the wolf pack slipped through the gaps in the defensive screen, like wolves through a broken fence. The result wasn't a battle. It was a slaughter. 13 merchant ships sunk. 72,000 tons of supplies vanished. And HMS Hesperus, Thomas's destroyer, went down because they did exactly what the book said to do. They chased a submarine that had already escaped. They left the safety of the convoy formation, and in that moment of vulnerability, a torpedo struck. The ship didn't just sink, it broke in half, 4 minutes from impact to the bottom. Most of the crew never made it to the lifeboats. Janet knew the exact timeline because she'd run this scenario in the pit 63 times. 63 separate simulations where she played the role of the German commander. And 63 times, British officers walked into her trap. They saw the bait. They took it. They chased. And she killed them. She tried to warn them. Captain Gilbert Roberts, the man who ran WW2, the Western Approaches Tactical Unit, had sent detailed reports to the Admiralty explaining the geometry of the failure, but the Admiralty's response was silence. Or worse, condescension. To the admirals in London, real combat experience trumped simulations. Officers with 30 years of salt in their veins knew better than a mathematics student with chalk on her hands. They couldn't imagine that the foundational principle of British naval warfare, seek and destroy, had become obsolete the moment submarines learned to hide underwater. So while the Admiralty sat in their oak-paneled offices reading reports about aggressive defense, Thomas was drowning in the freezing Atlantic. A victim of a doctrine that Janet had already proven was fatal. She couldn't write another report. Reports didn't save convoys. She needed something drastic. She needed to embarrass them into changing. If you walked past Derby House in Liverpool in 1942, you wouldn't have looked twice. It was just another gray building in a gray city. But inside, hidden on the top floor, was an operation so classified that officially it didn't exist. The Western Approaches Tactical Unit, WW2. If you're imagining a high-tech war room with flashing lights and giant electronic maps, adjust your picture. The pit was miserable. Concrete walls that wept with condensation. Heating that barely worked. A linoleum floor painted with grids to represent 900 square miles of the North Atlantic. It wasn't designed for comfort. It was designed for cold, hard calculation. But the most surprising thing about WW2 wasn't the conditions. It was the staff. Captain Gilbert Roberts had made a controversial decision when he was assigned to create this tactical unit. He didn't staff it with junior officers or decorated veterans. He recruited from the Wrens, the Women's Royal Naval Service. Young women, most of them teenagers, most of them fresh out of school. Janet O'Kell arrived in July 1942. She'd been studying mathematics and was recruited specifically for her exceptional geometric reasoning. Her teachers had noted something unusual. She saw patterns where other students only saw chaos. She could predict outcomes 3 moves ahead. Roberts didn't hire Janet and her colleagues because of a manpower shortage. He hired them because they were blank slates. Veteran officers were blinded by 20 years of tradition. They saw the ocean through the lens of Trafalgar and Jutland. They believed that naval warfare was about courage and aggression and bringing the fight to the enemy. Roberts needed minds that had no doctrinal bias, no preconceived notions of how a battle should be fought, people who would look at the problem purely as a mathematical equation. If X happens, then Y must follow, regardless of how it makes you feel. The collision between old and new happened fast. Commander Harrison walked into the pit on July 15, 1942. 32 years of experience. Veteran of the Battle of Jutland. Decorated war hero. You can imagine his face when he was told that a 19-year-old girl with a piece of chalk was going to teach him how to fight U-boats. The simulation was simple. Harrison commanded 8 destroyers, protecting a convoy of 40 merchant ships. Janet commanded 4 U-boats. Standard North Atlantic conditions, limited visibility, rough seas. Harrison deployed his escorts in a wide, aggressive perimeter. Overlapping search patterns. Destroyers spaced 3 miles apart, constantly sweeping the horizon. It looked impressive. It looked powerful. It was exactly what the Royal Navy manual said to do. Janet watched him for 30 minutes. She wasn't looking at his medals. She was looking at his geometry. She calculated the gaps between his ships. She measured the time it would take for him to turn and respond. She knew his doctrine better than he did. Then she sprung the trap. At 9:14 a.m., simulated time, she moved her lead U-boat into visual range. Deliberately, she let Harrison's lookout spot her periscope. It was bait. Harrison's response was instant. 2 destroyers broke formation, full speed ahead. They fired star shells. They dropped depth charges in a calculated pattern. They hunted aggressively, exactly as doctrine demanded. But while they were busy chasing Janet's decoy, she simply checked her stopwatch. For 18 minutes, Harrison's ships pursued a submarine that had already dove and slipped away. And during those 18 minutes, Janet's other 3 U-boats moved quietly into the massive gap he'd left in his defensive screen. They got inside the convoy. The result was mathematical slaughter. By the time Harrison's destroyers gave up the chase and returned to their stations, the floor was covered in red chalk marks. 12 merchant ships destroyed, 4 escorts damaged, 0 U-boats sunk. The game lasted 43 minutes. It was a massacre. Harrison was furious. He accused Roberts of rigging the game. He shouted that Janet didn't understand real combat, that U-boats couldn't actually move like that in the open ocean, that the simulation was unrealistic. Roberts didn't argue. He walked to a filing cabinet and pulled out a casualty report from June. Convoy HX 113. 16 ships sunk. 7 escorts present. The U-boats had used the exact maneuver Janet had just executed. The real-world results matched the simulation almost to the decimal point. Harrison went silent. He stared at the report. Then, he stared at the chalk marks on the floor. Finally, he looked at the 19-year-old girl standing across the table, and he realized something terrifying. He'd been commanding escorts for 18 months, doing everything right, following every order, and he had been unwittingly helping the Germans kill his own men. But proving it to one commander was different from convincing the entire Admiralty. And specifically, convincing Admiral Max Horton, the man who controlled everything, was a battle nobody thought they could win. Morning light awakens Dharampur as Mira steps outside peacefully, unaware her life is about to transform through a test of compassion. The soft mist near the river drifts gently as Mira walks calmly, sensing something unusual waiting in the quiet morning air. A faint cry echoes from a small bundle beside the river, drawing Mira closer as she feels concern rising within her heart. Mira uncovers the bundle and discovers a trembling baby, instantly realizing she must act quickly to protect the innocent child. Holding the shivering infant close, Mira wraps him warmly, determined to help despite not knowing who abandoned him there. Chaos fills the village square as people search frantically. Unaware, Mira carries the very baby they have desperately been seeking. Leela rushes through the panicked crowd, crying out in fear, grabbing her baby from Mira's arms without questioning the situation. Accusations erupt suddenly as Leela blames Mira, villagers whispering uncertainly while shock spreads through the tense gathering around them. Despite the painful accusations, Mira remains calm, silently enduring the villagers' doubts while her heart quietly absorbs the unexpected hurt. Leela walks away with anger and fear, leaving Mira alone in the center, surrounded by silence and uncertain faces everywhere. Inside her small home, Mira quietly reflects on the accusation, feeling hurt yet refusing to let anger change her gentle nature. A memory of her grandmother teaching forgiveness resurfaces, reminding Mira that compassion remains strongest during moments filled with misunderstanding. Nightfall cloaks Dharampur as Mira battles emotional pain, realizing true kindness remains steady even when wrongly judged by others. Mira gazes at the gentle moonlight, choosing inner peace over bitterness. Understanding forgiveness brings strength beyond temporary wounds. Early panic strikes Leela's house as the baby burns with fever, villagers gathering helplessly. fearing they might lose him forever. The baby's labored breathing and burning skin terrify Leela, who stands trembling as tears stream while she begs for help. Mira steps through the anxious crowd with steady courage, offering help despite the hurtful accusations she carried silently before. Leela hesitates, torn between guilt and desperation, finally deciding to trust Mira as fear for her child overwhelms everything else. Villagers hurry to assist as Mira instructs them calmly, transforming panic into cooperative effort to save the suffering infant. Mira cools the baby's fever carefully, working with focus and compassion while anxious villagers watch hope slowly return. She prepares herbal remedies with practiced hands, determined to fight the fever and give the fragile child a chance to recover. Villagers wait outside silently at dawn, hoping Mira's efforts will save the baby as sunlight slowly touches the quiet homes. A soft cry breaks the silence as the baby awakens, signaling hope, relief, and Mira's success in calming the dangerous fever. Leela collapses into grateful tears, overwhelmed by relief and guilt, finally understanding Mira's heart was pure from the beginning. Mira comforts Leela gently, reminding her that fear speaks louder than truth sometimes, and forgiveness brings healing to wounded hearts. Villagers watch with softened expressions, realizing compassion can mend misunderstandings far quicker than anger or suspicion ever could. The village elder bows respectfully toward Mira, acknowledging the courage she showed by choosing kindness during painful doubt. A passing traveler shares his memory of seeing a dog near the river, finally revealing clues about the baby's disappearance. A visual recollection shows the stray dog dragging the baby unknowingly, explaining how the child ended up alone near the river. Shock ripples through the villagers as truth clears Mira, leaving them ashamed for doubting someone who always showed kindness. Mira stands humbly as villagers apologize sincerely, her gentle smile showing she values peace more than proving herself right. Leela visits Mira's home tearfully, expressing remorse, hoping to rebuild trust after realizing the depth of her mistaken accusations. The two women sit together, sharing an honest conversation that slowly turns hurt into understanding, opening doors to new friendship. The baby rests in Mira's lap peacefully, symbolizing renewed trust as Leela watches with gratitude, softening her once fearful heart. Children surround Mira happily as she teaches them simple lessons about kindness, planting seeds of compassion within young minds. Leela joins Mira gathering healing herbs, showing their growing bond as they walk together through morning sunlight and rustling leaves. Inside Mira's home, she patiently teaches Leela basic healing skills, strengthening trust while the baby sleeps peacefully nearby. Villagers gather under lantern light, praising Mira's bravery and gentle heart, acknowledging how her forgiveness healed their community. The baby smiles brightly, grabbing Mira's finger as a sign of the bond built through love, trust, and quiet sacrifice. Walking through Dharampur, Mira receives warm greetings, proving kindness earns lasting respect even after difficult misunderstandings. 41. The baby takes his first steps toward Mira, filling Leela's eyes with gratitude as she witnesses the beautiful moment unfold. Children sit around Mira as she tells stories about compassion, shaping their understanding of kindness through her real experiences. An evening celebration glows with lantern light as Mira and Leela share joyful conversation, their friendship now deeply strengthened. Mira comforts a crying child gently, demonstrating again how her kindness continues touching lives throughout the village. Leela gifts Mira handcrafted bangles, expressing heartfelt gratitude for the forgiveness that restored peace and healed her troubled heart. The village square transforms into a celebration honoring Mira, filled with decorations, smiles, and appreciation for her example of kindness. Mira places flowers into the river peacefully, symbolizing her choice to release past hurt and embrace inner harmony. Village women gather around Mira to learn emotional strength, inspired by her ability to forgive even painful misunderstandings. A serene sunset over Dharampur represents restored peace, shining gently over the village that learned forgiveness through Mira's example. The baby sleeps safely in his cradle while Mira watches fondly, grateful for the blessing of peace returning to their lives. Inspired villagers listen carefully as Mira shares remedies and guidance, hoping to help others, just as she once helped them. At dusk, Mira lights an oil lamp, symbolizing the quiet strength that compassion brings, even in moments of personal struggle. Leela prepares a heartfelt meal, inviting Mira warmly, expressing gratitude through simple gestures filled with sincerity and friendship. The baby plays happily beside Mira and Leela as they laugh together, symbolizing healed hearts and renewed relationships. Children plant trees under Mira's guidance, learning how kindness grows stronger when shared generously with others. Mira prays peacefully under the banyan tree, surrounded by calming light that reflects her gentle and forgiving spirit. A gentle breeze moves across the fields as Mira walks with the baby, symbolizing harmony, returning after days of turmoil. Villagers gather for Mira's healing workshop, eager to understand compassion's power and how forgiveness transforms hearts deeply. The baby smiles brightly at Mira, representing pure trust and the bond formed through sacrifice, love, and unwavering kindness. Mira and Leela sit beside the quiet river, reflecting together and finding peace in lessons learned through difficult moments. A symbolic image shows fear leaving Leela's heart, replaced with calming light, representing understanding, healing, and acceptance. During a gathering, the baby falls asleep in Mira's arms, showing complete comfort and trust in her gentle presence. Children draw colorful kindness-themed pictures in Mira's home, learning compassion through her real-life teachings and heartfelt guidance. A village mother thanks Mira sincerely, acknowledging the positive changes her kindness brought into many families' lives. Mira hands out baskets of healing herbs, continuing her mission to help others with quiet dedication and unwavering compassion. Now a toddler, the child offers Mira a small flower, symbolizing innocence, trust, and a bond strengthened through forgiveness. Villagers gather to honor Mira, celebrating the strength she showed when choosing forgiveness instead of anger or retaliation. Mira stands peacefully by the riverbank, reflecting on her journey as the wind carries away the last traces of sorrow. Soft rays of light surround Mira, symbolizing the truth she lived. Kindness remains powerful, even when misunderstood for a moment. Mira walks through Dharampur at sunset, embraced by smiles everywhere, proving kindness truly never fails in the end. When the war ended, the Western Approach's tactical unit was classified. The records were sealed. Janet Okel, the woman who trained 5,000 officers and rewrote naval doctrine, signed the Official Secrets Act. She couldn't tell her family what she'd done. She couldn't put it on a resume. She married in 1947, became a mathematics teacher, and lived a quiet life in suburban England. For 30 years, her neighbors had no idea that the nice lady teaching their kids geometry had personally defeated the German Navy. It wasn't until 1998 that a comprehensive study of WW2's impact was published. Historians crunched the numbers. The result was staggering. The tactics developed by Janet and her team saved approximately 4,000 merchant ships. And inside those ships were 48,000 sailors who came home to their families instead of drowning in the dark. Admiral Sir John Fwan, who trained under Janet, put it best. "She taught me more in 3 days than I learned in 3 years at sea. She saved my life, and she did it with chalk on a floor." Janet Okel passed away in 2009. There was no state funeral, no medal ceremony on the steps of Parliament. But if you visit the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich today, you can find a small photograph from 1943. It shows the staff of WW2 standing in the pit. Janet is third from the left. She's holding a piece of chalk, looking directly at the camera. She looks determined. She looks focused. She looks like someone who knows the answer to a problem the rest of the world hasn't even understood yet. That photograph captures something history often forgets. Wars aren't always won by the generals on the podiums or the soldiers on the front lines. Sometimes, they're won by 19-year-old girls in basements who have the courage to tell the experts they're wrong. Thomas Okel's name is inscribed on a memorial in Portsmouth. One of 1,117 sailors lost with convoy SC-121. He died following orders, but because of his sister, because she refused to let his death be meaningless, 48,000 other sailors didn't. The Royal Navy called her tactics defensive thinking. History calls them something else, the mathematics of victory. And somewhere in the North Atlantic, where the waters are cold and dark, and the ghosts of 10,000 drowned sailors still drift beneath the waves, there's a truth written in chalk that nobody can erase. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is refuse to chase the enemy. Sometimes, wisdom looks like cowardice until it saves the world. Janet O'Kell understood that, and it made all the difference.